Right now, more than 100,000 people in American prisons are locked in a cell smaller than a parking space. Not a small parking space, a standard one. The kind you pull into at the grocery store. That space is bigger than where these people live. Not just sleep, live, all day, every day. Here's how it actually works, hour by hour, from the moment the door closes to the moment it opens again, if it ever does. The first thing that happens is nothing you can see. The door closes and the body starts running. That's the only way to describe it. Every stress signal the body has fires at once. Heart rate climbs, blood pressure goes up, a flood of hormones hits the bloodstream and tells every system to get ready, to prepare, to act. This is what your body does when it senses a threat. It's been doing it for 100,000 years. The problem is, there's nothing to act against. The room is 9 feet long and 6 feet wide. There is a concrete slab for a bed, a toilet and a sink bolted together in one unit, a shelf sometimes, a fluorescent light overhead that doesn't turn off, a solid metal door, not bars, metal. You can't see out. You can hear the ventilation hum. That's about it. In the normal parts of a prison, something is always happening. A nod from across the yard, someone saying your name, the sound of a television. The body uses all of that. It takes in those signals and uses them to say, still here, still okay, stand down. In the box, those signals stop. All of them. At once. And the stress response that fired when the door closed has nothing to turn it off. So it just keeps running. That stress response, running continuously like that, is the same one that shows up when you look at what sustained torture does to the body. That's not an editorial. That's what the mechanism is. The first food arrives through a slot in the door. Guards call it the bean slot, the chuck hole. The slot opens, the tray slides in, the slot closes. That's it. That's the whole interaction. Some people in the box describe days when that slot opening was the only time another human being acknowledged they existed. And even then, no one is acknowledging you. A slot opens. A tray arrives. The slot closes. That's not a conversation. That's a vending machine. The lights don't go out, not fully. In most cells, they dim slightly at night, but they never go dark. This is a security requirement. Guards need to see into the cell, so a low light burns all night, every night. You might think that's a small thing. By hour 6, you start to understand it isn't. The body knows night by darkness. Not just for sleep, for everything. Darkness is the signal that tells your brain to release the hormone that makes you drowsy. It's the signal that sets the clock that governs when every other hormone releases, when your immune system peaks, when your body temperature rises and falls. Take the darkness away, and the clock starts to drift. By the first full night, your body doesn't know what time it is. By the second day, it's already starting to fall apart. You start to sleep during the day, if you can call it sleep. You lie awake at night. This isn't weakness. It's what happens when you take away the one signal the body uses to know when to shut down. It's been recorded in cave explorers, in people in lab isolation studies. Solitary does it faster because the light is constant and unchanging rather than simply gone. And the guards come through on wellness checks, door after door, down the hall, at regular intervals. A bang on the door. A flashlight through the slot. Sometimes 2 in the morning, sometimes 3. This is officially a safety protocol. And it is. It's also the thing that kills whatever sleep you manage to find. The institution's safety measure and the institution's harm are the same action. Within 48 hours, the sleep system is broken. And when sleep breaks, everything else starts breaking faster. The stress hormones don't clear. Muscle repair slows down. The immune system drops. The part of your brain that handles memory and emotional regulation starts feeling the pressure of the hormones that won't stop. All of that, inside 2 days. Now let me tell you what comes next, because this is the part most people don't know. By day 3, 4, 5, something shifts. You start to hear things differently. The ventilation system, which you barely noticed on day one, has become something else entirely. The sound of a faucet turning on in a cell 2 floors up, traveling through the plumbing, hits you like something physical. People who have been through it describe covering their ears, yelling to make it stop. The brain, starved of variety, has turned up its own volume. Every sound that comes in gets amplified. Every flicker of movement at the edge of your vision demands attention. This isn't psychological fragility. This is what happens to a nervous system that isn't getting enough input. It overcompensates. And then the anxiety arrives, not attached to anything, not about a specific fear, just massive, free-floating dread that has no source and no target and no off switch. Panic comes with it. Your body is in a small room with no exit, already running a stress response for days, already amplifying everything. The conditions for panic are built into the architecture. People start to see things at the edges. A shadow moves, something shifts in the corner. Sound starts to seem like it means something, starts to seem like it's saying something. These are not full hallucinations yet. They're the first cracks in how the brain processes reality, and they're showing up in people who walked into that cell with no mental illness history. One account from a man who'd been through it. The sound of the plumbing became unbearable by day 5. He described it as someone pushing a button directly against his skull. He started yelling, not because he was upset in any ordinary sense, because the noise had become physically intolerable, and yelling was the only way to make another sound loud enough to cover it. By the second and third week, the cracks have become something else. What emerges by then is consistent enough across facilities, across different people, across different security levels, that it's been given a name. It's called SHU syndrome, named for the unit. And what it looks like is this. The hypersensitivity is now constant. There are hallucinations across multiple senses, auditory ones mostly, voices usually low, usually frightening, mechanical sounds that start to sound like voices, sounds that seem to carry meaning, seem to be trying to tell you something. Panic attacks are coming regularly. Sustaining a thought is becoming hard. Paranoia sets in, and in more severe cases, the break happens completely. The person is no longer in the same reality as the institution that put them there. About a third of people in these units, across multiple facilities, described hearing voices. None of them had any record of that before they went in. 3 out of every 15 people in one clinical study had made attempts on their own life while isolated. None of them had done so before. In one major jail system, a fraction of the population that spent time in solitary was responsible for nearly half of all the most serious acts of self-harm in the entire facility. In the federal system, nearly half of all suicides happen in restrictive housing. That's not a small fraction of the population. The population in solitary is a small fraction of the total, and they account for almost half the deaths by suicide. That's the ratio. People in the box describe the second and third week as when the counting starts. Ceiling tiles, times the slot opens, footsteps per round. Everything gets counted, then named. One man described when he started naming the tiles. He said that's when he knew something was wrong. The counting is a way to hold on. A structure the brain builds out of nothing because there's no structure coming from outside. Some people describe it as the thing that saved them. Some people describe it as the thing that scared them most. While the mind is doing all of this, the body is running its own slower clock. By 3 to 8 weeks, the physical decline becomes measurable in ways that have nothing to do with the mind. Muscle breaks down. The hour per day outside the cell, often in a small metal cage adjacent to the building, isn't enough movement to maintain what the body needs. Chronic elevated stress hormones make it worse by actively breaking down muscle protein and slowing the body's ability to rebuild it. Vitamin D starts to drop. The sun exposure in a caged outdoor pen, depending on the facility and the season, may be minimal or near zero. Without vitamin D, bones weaken. Muscle strength drops further. The immune system takes another hit. The heart changes. Without physical exertion, it becomes less efficient. The persistent elevated stress hormones push blood pressure up. Some people in long-term isolation develop palpitations, racing or irregular heartbeat, documented in clinical assessments. The gut goes. Chronic stress disrupts digestion directly. The food comes through a slot at unpredictable times, sometimes reportedly tampered with. Appetite drops, weight follows. And then there's the eyes. In a 9-foot cell, the farthest thing you can focus on is 9 feet away, for months, for years. The human eye is built to adjust between distances. In solitary, there is only one distance. Men who've spent years inside have described emerging nearly blind. One man who spent decades in a Louisiana cell described coming out and finding his near vision was mostly gone. He got lost in his own neighborhood repeatedly for years after. Not because he forgot the streets, because the part of the brain that handles spatial navigation had recalibrated to a 9-foot room, and everything beyond that had become territory it no longer knew how to read. That gets to you when you understand what that means. The system didn't just break his mind, it physically rewired the navigation system inside his skull, and then released him into a city and said, "Good luck." With months and years, the brain itself starts to change, not just in how it functions, in what it is. The part of the brain most important for memory, emotional regulation, and knowing where you are in space shrinks under chronic stress and social isolation. This is consistent in animal studies. In humans, you can see it in what the behavior shows: the memory lapses, the inability to navigate, the emotional control that isn't there anymore. The structural change in live human brains held in solitary is still being confirmed with imaging. But the behavioral signs are well on record. The part of the brain behind the forehead, the part responsible for making decisions, controlling impulses, and knowing how to behave around other people, also shows signs of deterioration after long-term isolation. That's the part you need to survive in the world. That's the part being dismantled. Identity becomes unstable. The self is built in part by feedback from other people, who you are to your sister, what your name sounds like when someone says it to you, what your own face looks like. Mirrors are generally not permitted in solitary. The feedback loop that tells you who you are, maintained by social contact, has been cut. After months, the loop goes quiet. About 1 in 4 people in long-term solitary describes reaching a point where they no longer know who they are, not as a metaphor, as a specific symptom. The continuity between who they were and who they are now has broken. And then comes the strangest part. After months in isolation, many people become unable to tolerate the presence of other people. The social capacity has atrophied. The person who is going insane from loneliness can't now bear to be in the same room as another human being. Too much noise, too much unpredictability, too much signal after nothing for so long. The system has destroyed the very thing a person would need to go back out and live. The longest documented stay in solitary in American prisons is over 40 years. One man, placed in a Louisiana cell in 1971, was released in 2016 at 69 years old. He spent more years in a 6-by-9-foot cell than most people spend in their working lives. More than 1,000 people in American prisons have been held continuously in solitary for 10 years or more. Now comes the door opening. And this is the part that most people never think about, because once someone is released, the system considers itself finished. When you walk out of a cell you've been in for months or years, the first thing you feel is too much space. That sounds almost absurd until you understand what actually happens. Your brain has recalibrated to a 9-foot room. That is the size of the world. Anything larger triggers a distress response. People have described walking into a normal room and feeling the ceiling was too high, feeling that being outside was physically dangerous. Multiple accounts describe former prisoners who turned around and went back inside within minutes of being in open air, unable to tolerate the exposure. Sunlight causes real pain. Eyes adapted to constant artificial light over months don't just adjust gently. Traffic noise, just regular street noise, is processed by a nervous system tuned to near silence as something close to assault. And other people's faces are too much. One man described seeing his sister on the day of his release and being unable to look directly at her. Not from shame. From the sheer volume of information a human face contains, information his brain was no longer equipped to process. He described it like looking into a light after total darkness. He said, "All I wanted was to see people again. Then I couldn't stand it." Here's what most people don't get about release from solitary. In 24 states, it goes directly to the street. No transition, no step down, no mental health care. A check. Sometimes a bus ticket. A man in Texas walking out with $100 and a ticket to his county of conviction directly from a unit where his brain has been rewired by years of isolation with no one on the other side. More than 10,000 people a year go through that door. People released from solitary are 24% more likely to die in the first year out than people released from general population. That already accounts for other factors. Add to that, nearly 80% more likely to die by suicide, more than 50% more likely to die by homicide, and in the first 2 weeks after release, more than 120% more likely to die of a drug overdose. In states where a step-down program exists, people who go through it are 35% less likely to commit a felony after release. 35% better outcome from just giving someone a gradual transition instead of throwing open the door. Every year, thousands don't get that. They get the bus ticket. A 22-year-old from New York City spent nearly 3 years in solitary at Rikers Island while waiting for a trial that ultimately never convicted him. The charges were dismissed. He was released. He was not okay. 2 years later, he was gone. His case became one of the most cited in debates about what solitary does to people who haven't been convicted of anything. What you've been watching across all of these phases is not a series of unfortunate side effects. That's the thing. Each phase follows from the one before it with a logic that holds whether you're looking at California or Louisiana or federal facilities or city jails. The same first hour, the same broken sleep, the same amplified senses, the same cracking perception, the same mounting psychiatric collapse, the same physical decline, the same brain changes, the same impossible release. That consistency is the point. It's not random, it's not individual. It's what the environment does to people, to any people. The pattern is the same whether someone went in healthy or not, educated or not, young or not, which means the outcome is a property of the condition, not of the people. The institution calls it administrative segregation, restrictive housing, a management tool. The language is designed to sound neutral, to sound procedural, like a filing system. The people inside call it the hole, the box, the bin, the bucket, the can. The language of people who know what it actually is. There are people who will tell you it's necessary, that some people are genuinely dangerous and alternatives don't exist. That argument has weight. There are people inside who have attacked other people, who cannot be safely housed in general population. The argument for solitary in a small number of specific cases deserves to be heard, not waved off. But here's what that argument doesn't account for. The system doesn't use solitary for a small number of specific cases. It uses it for 100,000 people on any given day. Most of them are not there for ongoing violence. Many are there for rule violations, for debts, for protection, for administrative convenience. And the system that was supposed to be a targeted last resort became an industrial-scale tool used on anyone who needed to be somewhere the institution didn't want to deal with. And every one of them goes through the same sequence, the same first hour, the same broken clock, the same fraying mind, the same body slowly declining in a room smaller than a parking space. America invented this practice in 1829. A philosopher who visited that first all-solitary prison wrote that it didn't reform people, it killed them. Within decades, the practice was mostly abandoned because the mental collapses were too visible to ignore. Courts in the 1800s noted what was happening and pulled back. The system knew, it was told. And then, in the 1980s and 1990s, during the expansion of mass incarceration, it came back, bigger, scaled up to industrial size, and it's been running ever since. You watched every phase of that. Most people don't. They hear solitary confinement and they move on because the thing that happens behind that door is hard to hold in your mind. You sat with it. That's not a small thing. If something in here changed how you think about what actually happens when that door closes, put it in the comments. Tell me which part hit the hardest. And subscribe if you haven't. You know what this channel is now. The door in that first Philadelphia prison is still standing. Eastern State Penitentiary is a museum now. You can walk through the cells. They're famous for the birdcage tours, the haunted nights, the history of crime exhibits. Tourists go and walk the same corridor and look into the same 9-foot rooms. They take photos, they read the plaques, they leave. The practice those rooms were built for never actually left. It just moved somewhere the tourists don't go.